Roman Reigns just pulled off the most shocking power move in WWE history by bringing Jon Moxley back to Raw specifically to replace Seth Rollins after the Visionary's devastating betrayal to join the Vision. And if you're not absolutely stunned by the Tribal Chief's strategic brilliance in reuniting with his Shield brother while completely destroying Seth's relevance, you clearly don't understand the personal warfare that just redefined the most important relationships in wrestling. What we witnessed wasn't just a surprise return, it was calculated revenge as Roman replaced the brother who betrayed him with the brother who truly understands loyalty, creating the most emotionally devastating message Seth could possibly receive. The sight of Jon Moxley standing beside Roman Reigns on Raw while Seth Rollins watched from backstage in absolute devastation will be remembered as one of the most brutal psychological attacks ever executed in professional wrestling. This wasn't just about gaining an ally, it was about showing Seth that he's replaceable and that his betrayal means Roman no longer needs him for anything. The cruelty of the replacement was absolutely surgical in its precision. Roman Reigns brought Jon Moxley back to WWE. He replaced Seth Rollins like he never mattered. Those weren't just shocked words from stunned commentators, they were horrified acknowledgments that the Tribal Chief had just inflicted psychological warfare so devastating that Seth's ego and self-worth may never recover from being publicly replaced by the Shield brother everyone always said was better. The weight of that humiliation is absolutely crushing. You want to talk about moves that fundamentally destroy someone's sense of importance and legacy? Roman Reigns didn't just bring back Jon Moxley as muscle or backup, he deliberately positioned Moxley as Seth's superior replacement in every way, making it crystal clear that the Tribal Chief views losing Seth to the Vision as an upgrade rather than a betrayal because Moxley represents what Seth could never be: genuinely loyal. The setup for Moxley's return was perfectly timed to inflict maximum emotional damage on Seth. Roman had been fighting alone against overwhelming odds since Seth's betrayal when suddenly during a beatdown that seemed hopeless, Moxley's music hit and the Death Rider emerged to even the odds while making it clear he was there specifically at Roman's request. But here's what makes this return absolutely devastating for Seth: Roman didn't need to convince or negotiate with Moxley. One call from the Tribal Chief and Moxley immediately left AEW and returned to WWE specifically because Roman asked, demonstrating a level of loyalty and brotherhood that Seth apparently couldn't provide. The contrast is absolutely brutal. The most shocking aspect of this return was Roman's public statement about why he brought Moxley back. Seth Rollins chose the Vision over his family, proving he's the same selfish traitor he's always been. But Jon Moxley? When his Tribal Chief called, he answered without hesitation because that's what real brothers do. Seth is replaceable, loyalty isn't. Here's a question that's going to reveal the full depth of this psychological warfare. Did you notice how Roman specifically used the word replaceable to describe Seth, attacking the Visionary's ego by suggesting his contributions were never as important as he believed? The actual reunion between Roman and Moxley was emotionally charged and deliberately designed to show Seth what genuine brotherhood looks like. The respect, the unspoken understanding, the immediate trust between them created a stark contrast with the calculated alliance Seth had with Roman before his betrayal. But the most devastating moment came when Moxley grabbed a microphone and addressed Seth's betrayal directly. "Seth, you've spent your entire career proving you're incapable of loyalty. You betrayed the Shield, you've betrayed every partner you've ever had, and now you betrayed Roman. Well, guess what? You just did Roman the biggest favor by showing him that some people are fundamentally untrustworthy. Now he's got a real brother by his side." The public character assassination was brutal and impossible for Seth to defend against because Moxley's points were entirely accurate. Seth's history of betrayal makes it impossible to argue he's loyal, meaning Moxley's attack hit with devastating precision that left the Visionary with no comeback. Quick question for the Shield historians: does Moxley's return and alignment with Roman validate the theory that Seth was always the weakest link who held back the faction's true potential? The most infuriating aspect for Seth supporters is that Roman's strategy is perfect. By bringing back Moxley specifically to replace Seth, the Tribal Chief has transformed from the victim of betrayal into someone who benefits from it by upgrading his ally. The narrative reversal is psychologically brilliant. The investigation into how Roman convinced Moxley to return reveals this wasn't spontaneous but rather carefully planned. Sources suggest Roman reached out to Moxley weeks ago, even before Seth's actual betrayal, suggesting the Tribal Chief may have anticipated the betrayal and prepared his countermove in advance. But perhaps the most shocking detail is that Roman apparently offered Moxley something he never offered Seth: true equality in their partnership. While Seth was always positioned as Roman's subordinate, Moxley is being presented as an equal partner, suggesting Roman values genuine loyalty enough to share power in ways he never would with someone he didn't fully trust. The revelation that Roman trusts Moxley enough for equal partnership while he never fully trusted Seth creates devastating implications. It suggests Seth was never truly Roman's brother in the same way Moxley is, meaning his betrayal actually freed Roman to embrace the authentic brotherhood he always wanted. Here's another question for the relationship dynamics experts: does offering Moxley equality while Seth was kept subordinate prove Roman always valued Moxley more, or is it a strategic move to ensure loyalty through respect? The most powerful moment came when Roman and Moxley recreated the Shield fist bump but deliberately left space for a third person who wasn't Seth. The visual message that Seth has been erased and replaced was so brutal that cameras caught him breaking down emotionally backstage. The testimonies from wrestlers who witnessed Seth's reaction reveal he was devastated in ways that went beyond storyline. Seth looked genuinely hurt that Roman replaced him so easily, one source revealed. The realization that he wasn't as important as he thought he was, that's the kind of psychological damage that changes someone. But the most disturbing aspect is that Seth brought this entirely on himself. His decision to join the Vision created the circumstances that led to Roman calling Moxley, meaning Seth's own betrayal triggered the sequence of events that resulted in his complete replacement and humiliation. The karmic justice of Seth's betrayal leading to his replacement is poetic but also genuinely tragic. He traded Roman's brotherhood for the Vision's promises, only to discover that what he lost was irreplaceable while what he gained was ultimately hollow. The fan reaction to Moxley's return has been absolutely overwhelming, with social media erupting in support of Roman's strategic brilliance. Wrestling fans worldwide are celebrating the Tribal Chief's perfect response to betrayal while Seth faces mockery and criticism for losing his position through his own poor choices. Here's a question about fan psychology: why are wrestling fans so satisfied by seeing someone replaced immediately after betrayal rather than seeing the betrayed party suffer and struggle? The most controversial aspect of this storyline is whether Roman's quick replacement of Seth diminishes the emotional impact of the betrayal. Some argue that immediately bringing in Moxley prevents Roman from showing vulnerability, while others believe the swift counterattack demonstrates strength rather than weakness. The testimonies from storytelling experts reveal divided opinions. Roman replacing Seth immediately shows he doesn't need anyone, which is powerful but potentially removes emotional depth, one analyst noted. However, it also prevents the tired trope of the betrayed hero wallowing in pain. But perhaps the most important question is what this means for the Shield's legacy. With Seth aligned with the Vision and Roman/Moxley forming a new partnership, the original trio's brotherhood appears permanently destroyed with no possibility of the nostalgic reunion fans once dreamed about. The investigation into whether the Shield can ever truly reunite reveals that Seth's latest betrayal may have been the final straw that makes reconciliation impossible. You can forgive a betrayal once, maybe even twice, one source explained. But Seth has now betrayed both his Shield brothers multiple times, there's no coming back from that pattern. The comparison between Seth and Moxley as Roman's partners reveals interesting dynamics. Seth was always the strategist, the talker, the political operator, while Moxley is the pure fighter who values action over words. The contrast suggests Roman has chosen raw loyalty over strategic cunning. Here's a question for the partnership analysis experts: is Roman better served by Moxley's straightforward loyalty or Seth's strategic intelligence, and does this choice reveal something about what Roman values most? The most terrifying implication for Seth is that he now faces opposition from both Roman/Moxley and the Vision. By betraying Roman to join the Vision, Seth burned his most important bridge, but if the Vision eventually betrays him too, he'll have absolutely nowhere to turn. The investigation into Seth's current status reveals he's reportedly expressing regret about his decision. Sources suggest he didn't anticipate Roman would replace him so quickly or effectively, and the reality of his isolation is apparently causing genuine emotional distress beyond just storyline. But the most shocking development is that some Vision members are apparently questioning whether recruiting Seth was worth the trouble he's brought. Roman and Moxley's partnership has proven so effective that the Vision now faces a more dangerous enemy than if they just left the Tribal Chief alone. The revelation that Seth's recruitment may have backfired for the Vision creates fascinating tension. He betrayed Roman thinking he was joining a winning team, only to discover he may have actually strengthened his enemy while weakening his new ally's strategic position. The most important consideration is whether the storyline represents the final chapter of the Shield story or if there's still potential for eventual reconciliation. Can brothers who have hurt each other this deeply ever truly reunite, or has the damage become irreparable? Here's a philosophical question about forgiveness: at what point does repeated betrayal make reconciliation impossible, and has Seth crossed that line with his actions? The testimonies from wrestlers who have watched this unfold reveal that many view this as a cautionary tale about loyalty and consequences. Seth's situation shows that betraying people eventually leaves you alone with no one to trust, one veteran explained. He's burned too many bridges to ever be secure again. The comparison to other famous wrestling betrayal consequences reveals Seth's situation might be uniquely self-destructive. Most wrestlers who betray allies either succeed completely or fail and return to their original group, but Seth exists in limbo where he's lost his brothers without gaining anything valuable in return. But perhaps the most devastating aspect is that Seth can't even argue Roman was wrong to replace him. Moxley's loyalty and effectiveness have been so obvious that Seth's contributions look minimal in comparison, meaning he can't claim he was more valuable than his replacement. The psychological impact of being provably replaceable and arguably upgraded is crushing for someone like Seth, whose entire identity is built on being the best and most important. Roman didn't just replace him, he replaced him with someone better, which attacks Seth's self-worth at its core. The most shocking theory is that Roman may have been planning this replacement even before Seth's betrayal. If the Tribal Chief sensed Seth's wavering loyalty, bringing Moxley back as a preemptive replacement would be strategic brilliance that anticipated betrayal and prepared the perfect counter. Here's a question about strategic planning. Do you think Roman genuinely didn't see Seth's betrayal coming, or had he been preparing Moxley's return as insurance against the betrayal he suspected was inevitable? The investigation into the timeline reveals suspicious evidence that Roman may have been in contact with Moxley for months before Seth's betrayal. If true, it suggests the tribal chief never fully trusted Seth and was always prepared to replace him, making Seth's betrayal a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the most important revelation is what this says about Roman's evolution as a character. The old Roman would have been devastated by Seth's betrayal, but this Roman weaponized it by turning the betrayal into an opportunity to upgrade his partnership. The growth is remarkable. The coming weeks will reveal whether Seth can find any path forward that doesn't end in complete isolation, or if his betrayal has permanently destroyed his ability to form meaningful alliances. Either way, Roman's decision to bring Jon Moxley back has created the most psychologically devastating response to betrayal in WWE history. Here's a final question for the entire WWE universe. After watching Roman Reigns replace Seth Rollins with Jon Moxley following the Visionary's betrayal to the Vision, do you think Seth deserves sympathy, or did he bring this complete isolation on himself? The wrestling world is stunned by Roman Reigns' perfect response to Seth Rollins' betrayal, bringing back Jon Moxley not just as an ally but as a superior replacement that renders Seth's contributions irrelevant. The tribal chief didn't mourn the loss of a traitor, he upgraded by reuniting with the Shield brother who understands genuine loyalty. Seth traded Roman's brotherhood for the Vision's empty promises and now faces the devastating reality of being completely replaceable and arguably replaced by someone better. Roman Reigns bringing Jon Moxley back to WWE RAW represents the ultimate psychological warfare against Seth Rollins, proving that betraying your brothers doesn't hurt them if they can immediately replace you with someone superior. The Visionary thought he was irreplaceable to the tribal chief, but Roman's swift action has shown that loyalty matters more than talent, and Moxley's genuine brotherhood is worth infinitely more than Seth's calculated alliances. Seth is replaced, Roman is stronger than ever, and the karmic justice is perfect.